What do you do when the laws are just ink, the border is just a rumor, and one man decides the price of disobedience is an entire city? Today I'm revealing the 10 most brutal ancient warlords in history, ranked by fear factor, punishment, control, and the size of the shadow each conquest left behind. Starting at number 10, Alexander the Great, King of Macedon. Imagine standing on a coastal wall while the sea is full of enemy ships. The land behind you is cut off, and a young conqueror tells you there is only one acceptable answer: surrender. We are in the 4th century before the Common Era, moving from Greece into Anatolia, the Levant, Egypt, then deep into Persia. Alexander is a battlefield commander who turns into a global campaign machine. His role in his world is the lightning conqueror, a king who leads from the front and demands total submission from cities that resist. One reason Alexander belongs on this list is simple. His mercy has conditions, and his punishment is meant to travel farther than his army. He uses speed, shock, siege pressure, and public examples to break morale. He is not just trying to win battles, he is trying to make the next battle not happen at all. Records describe the siege of Tyre in detail, and multiple ancient historians treat it as a turning point in how cities judged him. Some numbers differ between sources, so do not cling to a single total. Focus on the pattern. A famous city resists, the siege becomes personal, and the result becomes a warning to every port and fortress watching the coast. Here is the signature moment. Tyre sits offshore, protected by water and walls, and the defenders believe the sea makes them untouchable. Alexander orders a causeway built under constant attack, forces the issue with engineering, persistence, and brutality, then turns the fall into a message. He makes it clear that geography will not save a city once he commits. He wasn't just a brilliant general, he was a conqueror who trained the ancient world to fear refusal. What makes this terrifying is the math he teaches. Resist, and you become the lesson. Moving to number 9. Ashurnasirpal the Second, King of Assyria. Imagine your city opens its gates to negotiate, and the first thing you hear is not an offer but a list of punishments that has already been carved into stone. We are in the 9th century before the Common Era in Mesopotamia, within the Neo-Assyrian rise. Ashurnasirpal is a warrior king who runs an expanding imperial army. His role is the terror administrator, a ruler who uses fear as policy, not as emotion. The main reason he makes this list is the way he systematizes cruelty. He does not depend on one dramatic battle, he depends on reputation, repeated punishment, forced relocation, and public intimidation that spreads ahead of his troops. He also pairs violence with logistics, roads, tribute, and garrisons that keep conquered areas trapped in the system. The proof is not subtle. Royal inscriptions attributed to his reign describe punishments in plain, deliberate language. Records suggest he wanted future readers to feel trapped even without seeing his army. Some details come from propaganda, so treat the boasting carefully, but the point of the text stays consistent. Fear is the tool, and he wants you to know it. The defining scene is a city that hesitates after paying tribute once already. Ashurnasirpal marches back, not to negotiate, but to erase the idea that negotiation exists. He makes examples out of leadership, moves populations, and leaves behind a controlled emptiness where a rival identity used to stand. This is proof that ancient conquest was not always about territory. Sometimes it was about breaking the human instinct to resist. What makes this terrifying is the planning. Fear is not a byproduct. Fear is the mission. Moving to number 8. Bai Qi, the Butcher of Qin. Imagine watching two armies collide for months. Food runs out, surrender starts to sound reasonable, and then the winner decides surrender does not mean survival. We are in the late Warring States period in China, 3rd century before the Common Era. Bai Qi is a Qin general, not a crowned king, which makes his rise colder. His role is the annihilation specialist, a commander built for one purpose: remove enemy armies from the board in a way that ends future wars by ending future soldiers. Why he matters is the scale of decision-making. He favors encirclement, attrition, deception, and then final elimination. He understands that an enemy army allowed to retreat will regroup. He understands that prisoners returned home become recruits. His brutality is strategic, aimed at the next decade, not the next hour. The anchor detail comes from historical chronicles that describe the Battle of Changping and its aftermath. Numbers vary across traditions, and later writers had motives, so keep one phrase in your mind: records describe a mass killing of surrendered troops. Even with uncertainty on totals, the event sits in history as a benchmark of ancient battlefield cruelty. The signature moment is the trap closing. Two forces grind each other down, a surrender becomes inevitable, and Bai Qi turns the aftermath into permanent fear. Word spreads that Qin victory means more than defeat. It means erasure. That changes diplomacy, that changes alliances, that changes how cities calculate risk. He wasn't just a successful commander. He was the reason enemies started thinking in terms of survival, not honor. What makes this terrifying is the calm logic behind it. In a world where war never ends, he chooses a shortcut through mercy, moving to number 7. Moving to number 7, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, dictator of Rome. Imagine the streets of a capital city filled with whispers, because a new list is posted in public and the list decides who stays alive. We are in the 1st century before the Common Era, in the Roman Republic tearing itself apart. Sulla is not a frontier raider. He is an insider with legions. His role is the Civil War warlord, the man who turns political power into armed power, then turns armed power into legal murder. The reason he belongs here is the invention of state terror with paperwork. He marches on Rome, breaks taboo, then uses proscriptions to punish enemies, seize property, reward supporters, and teach the entire elite class that disagreement carries a price tag. This is brutality that hides behind law, which makes it spread faster. The proof lives in Roman historical writing that describes the proscriptions, the rewards for informants, and the confiscations. Accounts disagree on totals and motives, because ancient politics always edits the story, but the mechanism is consistent across sources. Names go up, lives end, estates change hands. The signature scene is not one battle. It is the moment a man reads the list and realizes he is not safe inside his own city. Friends become risks. Servants become witnesses. Alliances become traps. Sulla does not need to hunt everyone personally. He builds a machine that makes neighbors do the hunting. He wasn't just a Roman general. He was the blueprint for political violence with official stamps. What makes this terrifying is the efficiency. An empire does not need monsters when it can turn fear into routine. Moving to number 6. Ahuitzotl, Emperor of the Aztec Empire. Imagine walking into a conquered city where obedience is measured in tribute, and the punishment for refusal is not only military, it is spiritual, public, and designed to crush identity. We are in the late 15th century in central Mexico at the height of imperial expansion. Ahuitzotl is a ruler-warrior, the kind who leads campaigns to feed an empire. His role is the conquest emperor, a warlord king who ties war, tribute, and ritual together into one system. He belongs on this list because his brutality works on multiple levels at once. He expands aggressively, takes captives, demands tribute, and uses spectacle to enforce obedience across a network of cities. This is not random cruelty, it is controlled fear meant to keep rivals divided and subjects compliant. The anchor detail sits in indigenous codices and later chroniclers who describe major campaigns and the dedication of the Great Temple in Tenochtitlan. Some accounts are disputed and later writers had agendas, so be careful with exact numbers. Still, records describe massive ceremonies tied to conquest, and the political purpose is clear. The signature moment is the empire flexing at its center. Delegations arrive, enemies watch, allies watch, and the message is unavoidable. This capital is the heart of a system that can reach you. Ahuitzotl uses victory celebrations to reinforce that the empire is not only an army, it is a machine that demands submission in public. He wasn't just expanding borders, he was expanding fear through ritual authority. What makes this terrifying is the way violence becomes legitimacy. In a world where belief shapes obedience, he uses both to conquer. Moving to number 5. Moving to number 5. Attila the Hun, scourge of God in later stories. Imagine a border town hearing hoofbeats in the distance, not knowing if the next sunrise brings negotiation, ransom demands, or fire. We are in the 5th century across Central Eurasia and the edges of the Roman world. Attila is the leader of a mobile confederation, a steppe warlord who turns speed into leverage. His role is the extortion conqueror, a man who makes empires pay simply to delay devastation. The reason he matters is the pressure he applies without needing to occupy everything. He raids, threatens, negotiates, then returns with bigger demands. He forces Rome and Constantinople into humiliating payments and strategic panic. He also builds fear through unpredictability, which shatters planning and breaks alliances. One anchor comes from the account of Priscus, a Roman envoy who met Attila and described his court. That matters because it moves Attila from legend into recorded diplomacy. Other sources add drama, so treat the wildest claims with caution, but the core remains: he is powerful enough that Rome sends men to bargain face to face. The signature moment is the campaign into Gaul, ending at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. Attila pushes deep. Cities scramble, and coalitions form under stress. Even when he does not win cleanly, the damage lands anyway. The terror works even without a final conquest because the region never forgets how close it came to collapse. He wasn't just a raider, he was a walking deadline that governments could not ignore. What makes this terrifying is the leverage. He turns movement into power, and fear into currency. Moving to number 4. Basil II, Byzantine emperor, remembered as the Bulgar Slayer. Imagine you are a soldier in a defeated army, and the punishment that follows is meant to travel home faster than any messenger. We are in the late 10th and early 11th centuries in the Balkans and the Eastern Mediterranean. Basil is a ruler who commands both army and state. His role is the Iron Discipline Emperor, a warlord on a throne who treats rebellion and rival kingdoms as problems to be ended permanently. He makes this list because his brutality is not chaotic. It is institutional. He wages long war, applies relentless pressure, and uses punishment to break the enemy's will to continue. He also understands propaganda in its raw form. One terrifying outcome can end 10 future campaigns. The proof sits in Byzantine chronicles that describe the aftermath of the Battle of Clivion in 1014. Some details get debated, and medieval writers often amplify horror, so keep that in mind. Still, the tradition around Basil's punishment becomes central to his reputation, and even rivals repeat the story because it serves a purpose: fear. The signature moment is not only the victory, it is the aftermath that becomes legend. Basil does not settle for tribute and a handshake. He makes sure the defeated kingdom feels the loss in its bones, and the political center receives that message in the most direct way possible. He wasn't just defending Byzantium, he was teaching neighbors that resistance leads to permanent damage. What makes this terrifying is the patience. He does not need a dramatic sprint. He breaks opponents through years, then ends them with one final statement. Moving to number 3. Vlad III, Vlad Tepes, ruler of Wallachia. Imagine riding into a country where the roads are quiet, the villages look abandoned, and the ruler wants you to feel watched even when nobody stands in the open. We are in the 15th century in the region that sits between the Kingdom of Hungary and the Ottoman frontier. Vlad is a small state warlord with a big enemy, which pushes him toward extreme tactics. His role is the terror defender, a ruler who uses punishment and spectacle to compensate for fewer troops, fewer resources, and constant betrayal pressure. Vlad belongs here because his cruelty is a weapon system. He uses intimidation to control nobles, scare invaders, and freeze internal revolt before it starts. He also weaponizes law in a direct, brutal way. Theft, disloyalty, corruption, even disrespect all meet punishment designed to make the rest of the population police itself. This is not conquest on a grand map. This is control through fear inside a narrow corridor of land. The proof exists in a messy pile of sources: Ottoman accounts, local chronicles, and German pamphlets that spread stories across Europe. Some of those pamphlets are propaganda. and some are political revenge, so certainty gets complicated. Still, multiple independent traditions agree on the core reputation. Vlad used impalement and public punishment at a scale that turned his name into a warning. Even if a detail shifts from one account to another, the pattern does not disappear. Here's the signature moment. Ottoman forces push toward his territory, expecting fear from peasants and submission from nobles. Vlad responds with scorched resources, night raids, and traps meant to exhaust the invaders. Then comes the psychological hit. Accounts describe an approach to a field of impaled bodies near Targovista, arranged to shock. He is making a statement without needing a speech. He is telling a massive empire that occupation will cost more than the empire wants to pay. He wasn't just a cruel ruler. He was a smaller power that forced a larger power to hesitate. What makes this terrifying is the intent. He makes fear do the fighting before swords meet. In a world where weakness invites conquest, he chooses reputational violence to survive. Moving to number two. Timur, called Tamerlane in later tradition. Imagine a city opens its gates, hoping surrender means safety, and the conqueror walks in already planning what the ruins will communicate to the next 10 cities on the road. We are in the late 14th and early 15th centuries, spanning Central Eurasia, Persia, the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, and into northern India. Timur is a Turco-Mongol warlord who builds an empire through campaigns that never stop long enough for rivals to breathe. His role is the terror architect, a commander who mixes steppe mobility with deliberate mass punishment to keep his rear secure. Timur belongs near the top because of the combination: scale, planning, and reputation management through controlled horror. He uses fast-moving armies, siege expertise, intelligence networks, and forced population transfers to enrich his capital and weaken conquered regions. He also uses selective mercy in a cold way. A city that submits early might survive. A city that resists becomes a signal tower built from destruction. This is conquest designed to reduce future resistance, even if it poisons the land for generations. The proof shows up in Persian chronicles tied to his court, plus later regional histories that record the aftermath of his campaigns. Writers differ in tone and totals, and some sources read as glorification, so keep skepticism active. Still, multiple records describe the same trademarks: brutal sackings after resistance, mass killings after revolt, and displays meant to terrify survivors into spreading the story for him. When a conqueror becomes a traveling rumor, he gains power without spending soldiers. The signature moment hits hard in Delhi in 1398 and again in cities across Persia and Mesopotamia. Timur walks into wealthy regions, faces rebellion or panic, and responds with punishment meant to break the idea of uprising. Accounts describe towers or piles of skulls built after massacres. Do not get lost in the gore of that image. Focus on the strategy behind it. Timur is building a warning that lasts longer than his supply lines. He is telling every governor, every merchant, every militia captain, resistance does not end in negotiation, it ends in an example. He wasn't just conquering, he was editing the future choices of everyone who heard his name. What makes this terrifying is the cold consistency. He turns cruelty into policy, then uses policy to move faster than any rival can react. Moving to number one. Genghis Khan, founder of the Mongol Empire. Imagine watching the horizon for dust clouds because the scouts keep disappearing, the villages keep going silent, and then a messenger arrives with one offer: submit fully now or disappear from the map. We are in the early 13th century across the steppe and into northern China, Central Eurasia, Persia, and beyond. Genghis begins as Temujin, a man forged in clan violence and survival politics, then becomes the architect of a war machine that changes global history. His role is the total conquest warlord, a commander who merges mobility, discipline, intelligence, and terror into one system that keeps expanding even after common sense says it should stall. He takes number one because the brutality is not separated from the organization. It is integrated. He builds a legal code to enforce discipline, punishes betrayal ruthlessly, and rewards loyalty in a way that pulls rivals into his structure. Militarily, he uses scouting screens, feigned retreats, encirclement, and relentless pursuit. Politically, he weaponizes surrender terms. If a city submits early, it can live and serve the empire. If a city resists, the punishment can be so severe that the next 5 cities choose surrender before a single arrow flies. That is fear used as logistics. That is cruelty used to save time, save horses, save supplies, and keep momentum. The proof is stacked across sources: the secret history of the Mongols, Persian histories, Chinese records, and accounts from regions that survived the wave. Numbers differ wildly depending on the author and the century, so do not cling to a clean total. What matters is the repeated description of methods: targeted annihilation after resistance, mass deportations, the use of captured engineers, the spread of panic through controlled rumor, and the deliberate destruction of elites who could restart rebellion. Even when later empires tried to soften the memory, the pattern kept showing through. Now the signature moment. The Khwarezmian Empire insults him, kills Mongol envoys, and turns a trade dispute into a personal and political break. Genghis responds with a campaign that does not resemble a normal border war. He divides forces, hits multiple cities with coordinated timing, uses intelligence to exploit rivalries, and punishes resistance so thoroughly that whole regions fall into chaos. Accounts describe cities such as Bukhara and Samarkand facing surrender demands, then facing consequences when leaders refuse or revolt later. Again, exact numbers shift, but the terror strategy does not. He wants news to travel ahead of his columns, he wants defenders to panic, leaders to blame each other, and garrisons to crack before siege engines even arrive. He wasn't just a conqueror. He was the designer of a fear-driven empire that could keep moving without collapsing under its own weight. What makes this terrifying is the balance. Discipline inside, terror outside, and a clear system for turning enemies into tools. In a world where warlords often burn out fast, he builds an engine that outlives him, reshaping trade routes, borders, and the fate of entire populations for centuries. That is why he holds number 1. So those are the 10, not just winners, but names that turned fear into strategy and control into an art. Legends, conquerors, and nightmare rulers carved into record, stone, and memory. Now tell me in the comments, who hit hardest for you and why? Drop your pick, hit the button to like and subscribe, and if you want another countdown, I can do Most Savage Ancient Sieges next.